Thank you.
We can probably hear you.
If you want to speak loudly, if you want to, from where you're at.
Hi, Wade. Excellent presentation. Thank you. And absolutely, excellent presentation. And I appreciate the points that you were making about the plan, right? All politics is local. So the question becomes, if we could get the Forest Service to subscribe to that plan, how are we going to hold their feet to the fire over the long haul? In other words, where is there a board of local politicians, perhaps judge executives in the local counties, a series of, to create a board that says the local people are going to oversee the implementation of the larger government in action? And the other question is, so we have these recreational areas that are dilapidated and falling apart. And that requires money to keep them working, right? So there's money being generated from these street sales, yes? Well, where's that money going and why couldn't
I agree.
to fund the local government,
Yeah.
to fund the local government, in other words, to create a local board that oversees what was taken from local people? I mean, maybe I'm asking too much.
No, it's fine. Let me give you my thoughts on that, because I think when the Forest Service took over, Congressman Whitfield helped set up the Protection Act, and in it gave an advisory board, but that's been worthless to us. It's not worked. And anything that we do, I believe that the congressman, he understands that, and I think that we do need to look at something to where we could have a better voice instead of having to do this over and over and over. There's got to be some way that we can have a seat at the table to where we can discuss what's going on. As far as the money, I don't know. I still think that there should be some type of a way to look into that. Yes, sir.
Was the Forest Service asked to be here tonight?
I didn't ask them. I wanted it to be us talking about what we're going to do. We just met with them 2 days ago, and I'll go ahead and tell you what she did say. Said she would listen. I didn't get any concessions that I wanted, but she did say she wanted to hear from you guys. So on the paper, on the tables, are things that I want you to write your concerns and write them about what's going on. There's petitions over here, but these things that are on the table, the little squares, fill them out, sign them, write down what you want to say, and we'll make sure she gets them, and I'm going to make copies for the congressman and the 2 senators.
Hey, Wade.
Yes, sir.
Come down. Bring her down.
All right.
Bring her down. Don't talk.
I've talked to her
Yeah.
about Woodson Chapel Road. My great-great-grandfather buried down there in Woodson Chapel Cemetery. And it's 5.5 miles down that road. You can't even hardly get down. It's rough. And if you got a 4-wheel drive, you can. But you can ask them, well, what are you doing about the roads? I can only do 160-something of the roads each year. You know.
Yeah, I mean, we've had that debate. We've had that debate big time, and my definition of access to a cemetery is my grandmother can drive her car there. Until then, I don't have access. So I'm with you.
I agree with Wade's analogy of that. And over the past couple of years, I know there's different times we've had to take our road equipment over there to be able to get a hearse to a cemetery to bury a couple of 3 residents from Trigg County. So we have had that debate, and we will continue to fight that fight. And that's one of the main reasons that I got into this fight, was the roads and that sort of thing, and it's just continued in progress into this. Go ahead, sir.
I'd like to make one thing clear to everybody. I've heard Wade stand up and ask Miss Tilly to stop cutting logs. She said, okay. She'd stop. He said, will you stop where you are now? She said, no, we've already contracted 5,000. We said 5,000 acres, and he sat there and said, no, that's wrong. It was 5,160 acres, or contracted out before the public was ever notified for comment. That's my point. What do you think about it?
Agree with you.
I agree, it's already been sold, and I think Wade made that point with her
And that-
2 days ago.
Yeah, that's part of my request is to not move forward with anything until we have this debate. I don't know, I guess.
That's what she told us.
So my head.
It's contracted, and that's something that we haven't, I mean, go ahead, Mike, if you want to answer that.
We asked her that question the other day about, Wade had brought up the point about the yellow signs and if that meant that they'd been sold for the next cut, and she said it had been. She said that had been gone through the process long before they got into the Pisgah Bay thing. My question to her was, can you go back and cancel those contracts and stop that from happening? She said we can, but it would cost the federal government a lot of money to buy those out and pay them extra fees for that. All three of us were for doing that. So she did not give us a figure as to what that value would be to the federal government, but it is something yet that we can go back and tell her. That would be one of our comments, is we would like you to cancel those contracts until we've had a further review of this. So we're willing to do that. But again, like I said when I was up here, the good thing, her boss is the chief of the U.S. Forest Service, and then their boss is you. I mean,
Why are you talking to her? Talk to him.
the reason we talked to Tina Tilley, of the managers that we've had on the ground since the Forest Service took over, and I think the judges would agree to this, she's been the best to work with. She's sat down and worked with us on a variety of issues, and to some degree, we feel that her heart is trailing along with some of your sentiments about this. But the fact is, as you said, who's her boss? She works for the U.S. Forest Service. That's her career. That's where her job's tied to. And the thing that we've told her, and I told her this personally, I said, Miss Tilley, I have confidence in you to do the right thing, and these judges do too. And if you're willing to do the right thing and use your maximum discretion as the resource manager for LBL, you'll have the full backing of the United States Congressman. If you take any repercussions on up the chain from the Forest Service, the congressman and our judges and all of our local citizens, including all of you in here, would be behind her. I would assume that'd be correct, wouldn't it? That's the message. That's the message I believe we need to convey is do the right thing with your maximum discretion as the manager out there. If you take blowback from it or repercussions for doing the right thing, then that's when the congressman and our senators and others can step in and say, she's doing what the people here have asked her to do that were once residents of this land. So our...
As long as she's getting money, it's gonna continue. As long as there's money changing hands, it's gonna continue.
We asked her about the money for the timber sales.
You stop my money, I'm gonna
Right.
stop it. Just
Absolutely.
like
But again, the point that we're trying to make is this is what is in the best interest of this land for the U.S. taxpayer, for the people that have been moved off the land, and that we want to see it done this way. And so if she's not willing to go with us on that or try to help us with that, then we'll use Plan B, and that is to go around that. But the first step was, let's try to get her on board with us, to go with us on it, and then if she will, to support her on it. If not, we'll move on to another plan.
Have anybody else offered up any other plans? Like maybe cutting timber throughout all of LBL, but not clear cutting one area? I mean, if they needed to raise money to provide for the roads, or to provide for the campgrounds, or the other services, then, I mean, I think that, could she not go in and take out lumber everywhere in order to cover it instead of, going to drive through it and just having large chunks missing?
We asked her about that. She told us that the money that is generated from a log sale cannot be used for recreation and other purposes at LBL. She said that that money goes back to habitat restoration and the site that was logged, if it comes back to
Basically environmental education, and a lot of those facilities that are closing are environmental education facilities. I was an environmental education student with Edinburgh State University in my master's
Right.
degree. And as a person who has ancestors who were residents there too, and the father who used to be a logger, I have a very interesting perspective on it all.
Right.
I don't have a problem with logging. Because I know that when a tree is damaged or has been there for a certain amount of time, it's gonna just fall anyway, eventually. Cut out some of the ones that are damaged or older or whatever. I get that, make some money from that, but put it back into those facilities and get environmental education going the way it was. Because
Right.
as I know right now, when I went and stayed for a week at Brandon Springs as part of one of my classes, a lot of the maintenance that's being done there at Brandon Springs is being done by students who are trying to keep that facility in working order.
Right.
And within the last 10 years of when I started my master's degree and when I finished it, I had been there both times. And within that 10 years, I saw that facility go from, wow, this is a beautiful place that needs a little bit of work, to, oh my goodness, I don't know what's happened here.
You know, the irony of it is, back when we talked about the LBL Protection Act and what we had to do to take TVA out of the management structure, we did that because they wanted to bring in an idea for recreation that was totally contrary to why we felt the land was taken in the first place, as stated. They wanted to put in a theme park concept, if you remember. They wanted to add a lodge. And that first battle was about stopping that overreach into recreation. Now we find ourselves dealing with an issue on what they consider stewardship of the forest, as Wade and Hollis pointed out, a pre-European grassland model versus what we always known LBL to be. So that's where we find ourselves today, and the points that you make are very good. What I think would have to happen is the congressman would have to sit down with the top folks at the Forest Service and say, do you have the ability administratively under the current law to take those funds and move them around to different areas rather than just putting them in one spot? And if you can't, then maybe we need to change that. Yeah, good point.
I'm not a resident up there, haven't ever been, but we had, the Forest Service had a meeting of our LBL club, and the guy that was in charge of the timber cutting was there. Was also discussing the roads. We needed to repair the roads, this sort of thing. So I stood up and made a suggestion. I said, well, why don't you use the money that you make on logging to fix those roads? And the guy stood right there and looked me straight in the face and said, we don't make any money on cutting those logs. I said, we don't make any money.
Yeah, I agree.
One of your statements that you made, I don't really need this, just dumbfounded me, that they would take the money from cutting the logs to restore the area that they just stripped off. So it's a zero sum.
It dumbfounded us too when they got the.
I think the real weak linchpin in this, I've been a geologist for 30 years, so I offer my services of reviewing government documents, is this pre-European model. That is false. That only existed along some of the rivers along here because they didn't have chainsaws, they didn't have anything. They would not have the proper soil, the topography is too steep to do slash and burn out there. That's just absolutely false. And I would love to delve into where that came from and where that one slide came from that says that somebody preferred that. Just going right back, where is that citation?
Yeah, I want to know too.
Who is that person?
We haven't found those people either.
And as far as logging goes, they don't go after the damaged trees. Those aren't worth any money.
Yeah.
They go after those prime white oak logs, the veneer logs. So, thank you. You've done a great job.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Go ahead, sir.
My name's Charles Ruffner, and I don't expect to make many friends here. I'm a professor of forestry at Southern Illinois University, so I do have a few degrees in forestry, and I have a few issues with some of the statements made on your video, Judge. I would like to know if anybody in this room can go along the trace and identify any of the 1,000-acre clear cuts that were done in the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
I've actually got a map of it back there if you'd like to see it.
Yeah, I saw it.
It's
So
dotted up completely.
how many people can go there now and find any one of those old clear cuts that are now 50, 40, 50 years old? Let me make a point. The point is that they were not 100-year mistakes when they were made 30, 40 years ago. They have filled back in. They are trees now. You're not going to have a 100-year mistake, as you're saying. So, and as I said, I've been very, very polite to everybody here, so I would like it just the same, okay? As far as the recreational resources for educational for educational outreach, There are thousands of people that come here every year from across the country to see how these oak grasslands are made and how they are maintained. They come to this area to do that from across the Forest Service, from across the federal agencies. So I think that the place is still utilized for education. It's still a huge part of it, and I'm sorry that y'all are feeling this way.
Who's next?
Thank you. Next. Please be respectful to whoever's speaking, please.
Go ahead while he's on his way.
Yes, you go ahead.
All right, my name's Kathleen Blank, and I'm from Chicago, so don't shoot me, okay? I got kin, though. My mom is from Fair Dealing. I don't know if I had any family in this area. But first, I want to say thank you, White, very much. I would have not known anything about this had it not been for the Facebook page. I was appalled that even my family down here, no one knew a thing about it. And as I've gone around talking to folks about it, the one thing that is absolutely crystal clear is that people don't want grassland. I do not know who they surveyed, okay? I represent people that come down here to hike. I just drove 450 miles to hike down here. We couldn't even get into any of the trails because of the snow. None of it was removed. I get it. You guys aren't Chicago. I get that, okay? But I don't come
And
down.
we're glad not to be.
I know. I know. I can't imagine LBL without those woods, though. That is why we come here. The lakes are nice, don't get me wrong, but we come here for the woods. If I want grass, I'll stay in Chicago. In fact, Chicago has 70,000 acres of woods all around the outer skirts of the city. They've made a great commitment because they know that people want wooded areas. Again, in Wisconsin, they've done the same exact thing. And you know what? You cannot go back in 50 years and see what it looks like now. It's awful what they've done up there. So I want to thank you, though, for all the work that you've done.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I want to thank the gentleman from Illinois, the forest guy. We have to hear opposing points of view. We really have to hear intelligent, debated, different points of view. So what I was saying earlier, and I really want to drive this point home, it's critical. All politics is local. What if down the road, the LBL was this idea that we're going to have this great recreation area, and someday there's going to be a Disneyland there, et cetera, et cetera. Well, right now that sounds appalling. It sounds appalling, does it not? But life changes. Things change over time. And if we have an advisory board that oversees this piece of land, that whatever government entity in Washington must subscribe to, then it's local. And things are going to change over time. You know, our needs, the landscape of us are going to change. We're going to die and our kids are going to take over the place. It's going to change. But if we have that advisory board and we can get that etched in stone, then we have a local group of people who are overseeing this property for its good in perpetuity. Now, that may be asking a lot, a whole lot. But all the things that Wade said tonight, this is what we're going to ask the Forest Service to do. We've got point number 1, point number 2, point number 3. They're great points. But someone over the long haul has to hold their feet to the fire.
Good point. Good point.
This gentleman.
And we're willing to try to do that. So.
Go ahead. You've been waiting for a while. Go ahead.
I got a question. I've stood in here and I've listened to all this, but there's 2 words I've never heard. And I'd just like to see if y'all ever thought of this, if it's ever come up. Federal lawsuit, federal judge. It's the only way you ever stop it. Since that idea will ever come up.
Now that's fine, but also remember this. Think about who packs the federal bench right now. Would we win the lawsuit? I mean, that's what when you get into that territory, you really got to look at who the judges are that might oversee that case. And we don't mind going anywhere we need to win, but we want to win when we go there. So that could help you, but it could also set you back. So, but that's a good point to make. It's a good point to make, and we'll look at all possibilities.
I had a couple of things I was going to talk about, but I first want to respond to the lawsuit question. The unfortunate reality is the Forest Service can do a lot of very poor things on the landscape and still be within the letter of the law, or at least be within the law as the courts have defined it. So they can do some really bad stuff, and whether or not there's not a lot of opportunities to go to court, unfortunately. That's just how it is. A couple of things I wanted to mention. There was a question about where this grassland model comes from, and there is good evidence that these barrens and grasslands and woodland type communities were present and were important at the land between the rivers for a very long time. But the research that the Forest Service is basing their models on does not say that the entire peninsula was in that condition. It says these types of communities existed there and were important. And what's happened is the Forest Service has taken studies that were then turned into reports that overstated what the study said, and then the Forest Service has exaggerated what the report said. And so it's like this game of telephone that keeps growing what has to be managed to create pre-European. So they throw this term around as if they know exactly what it was, and what they're saying actually isn't even quite backed up by the science. But what's really important is, as the numbers in the video showed, the Forest Service at LBL, they maintain about 10,000 acres as permanent open lands. That's crop leases, pasture, native grasses, and wildlife plantings, and a few other things. And they have goals in the forest plan where they're supposed to be restoring some of that to native grasses, and they're not doing that. Instead, they're cutting areas to try to promote native grasses while failing to actually restore non-native pasture to native grasses, let alone these commercial crop leases, which you don't see on any other national forest. It's really bizarre. And what else I think I want to respond to is the issue about the previous timber sales and the TVA timber sales. Trees grow back, we all know this, but there are old forests. Now, from a timber perspective, you don't want your forest getting much over 100 years because trees might hollow out, fall down, do all these things that aren't good if you're looking for a dollar. But for a forest to function properly, big trees, old trees, decadent trees, fallen down trees, standing dead trees, those are all really, 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 really important. That map back there on the wall, if you all haven't seen it, you should really look at that. When we've asked the Forest Service how much has been cut in the last 30 years, they can't answer it. They can only say it's been cut in the last few years. Then they supplied Judge White with a stack of hand-drawn maps from TVA. The Forest Service has not incorporated into any of their inventories, any of their data. They don't know what's there. And so it took a judge executive time with markers to draw on a map to actually show how much TVA actually cut in all those years. And while a lot of the stands have grown back in trees, the big trees aren't there, the den trees aren't there, the snags aren't there. These are all young forests. These are immature forests, and there's a lot of it. And we don't need to be cutting the old trees, the old forests, to make young forests and grassland. We've got open grassland to work with. We've got young forests to work with. You don't have to sacrifice the best forest that's left just because you can make some extra money off of it to put into the budget. And it's in this weird pretzel of a budget that they have that nobody understands. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Barry Littlejohn.
My name is Barry Littlejohn from Creek County, Cape, Kentucky. All my family born and raised comes from the roots of between the rivers. I wasn't born there, but I have moved and lived there before they moved out when I was very young. With family members, I stayed there many a night from time to time. And I want to commend all you guys on the job that you're doing, standing up, fighting for this, and the way that you're approaching it. The BTR group that's formed and standing firm with a lot of the Between the Rivers people. And all the points have been made is very well done. And I'm all for Judge White and doing it the right way, civilized and upfront. And the request and the accusation that you've asked for is the proper way to handle it that can be done. And I hope it can. But we need to have a plan to stop roads, waterways, Corps of Engineers, anything. If they refuse to work and agree with requests, it's just asking to give time and prove this can be done, and they refuse to do that. And we need to get our state congressmen, senators, local politicians, and federal ones to stop the waterways and the lines, Livingston County roadways. Creek County has control of those roadways, If Livingston will step up and not allow them to take nothing out their roads, don't allow them to use the water, if we can make the politicians, they can stop the ball until they can get some respect and answers for these promises that have never been kept or honored.
My family's name is Between the Lake, and I appreciate what y'all are doing and everything. I agree with doing it right, because my belief is that once they get these bridges fixed and overland between the lake, it's gonna open up the traffic here, which was taken away back in the 80s when they built I-24 around Canton. And somebody said that was supposed to be another place like Gatlinburg or something, I forget who said that. And I believe if the forest would work with the people, and the people will work with the forest, it could be a better place for all of us, if we can all work together.
We certainly agree with that. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Mary Sports guy. One thing I haven't heard mentioned too much about is the hunters. My husband and son hunt. We're former residents from over there. And there's hundreds of people that go up there and hunt deer, turkeys, squirrels, whatever is in season. What happens? How can the hunters hunt when they don't have wood?
We agree, and we've asked those questions as well. That's part of our concerns. We're going to have about 10 more minutes here or so. Yes, sir.
My name's Robert Higgins. My dad was from Land Between the Lakes. I was with Concept Zero. We fought TVA. That one we won. The first one we lost. My father taught me, my brother, my two sisters. We taught our children. Our children will teach their children. We're not going to go away. We're not going to allow the Forestry Service or anyone else to desecrate that land over there.
Here, here.
That is ours. We own it. We're in charge of it. And when the Forestry Service starts listening to that, we'll get somewhere. Now, I listened to them talk about Mr. Forston, talk about, going from a 40-hour week to a 20-hour week. Well, greed stopped that. We went from 40-hour week to 50-hour week to 60-hour week. Right. We fought that greed once before whenever they were trying to move all that from Nashville up here to put in this amusement park over here. We beat them there. If we stick together, we can beat them again here.
That's something we can certainly look into.
I could answer that
Go
for
ahead.
you. I'm a wildlife professional, a biologist actually. I have a career.
Please be respectful.
Career in the outdoors. Furthermore, I'm more of a sportsman, and I love the land. I'm very tied to it. Love the place over here. It means a lot to me and my family. But yes, it has been demonstrated in other areas in the U.S. There are basically hundreds of peer-reviewed journal articles by professionals from across the United States where this is a very successful technique. And I understand tonight that a lot of folks here are upset about what's going on, and we've heard some sides that may be a little bit inflated on details and information for a purpose, and that's understandable. All I can do to tell you is that the grasslands that we keep talking about is going to be actually less than 5% of the area, and then also the area where we talked about earlier of native warm season grasses. They have been starting to restore those in areas, actually. And really the prescribed fire is a very good tool at managing. And the overall goal is not to create clear cuts across the landscape. It is a patchwork. There are basically 1.4 million people that come to LBL each year. Sportsmen. I represent a very large sportsman's group, and we number in the tens of thousands just here in this state. And our folks, since 2011, if you want some stats, from Kentucky Game and Fish, and you can look it up, but since 2011, there's been a 16% increase in use for recreational use by sportsmen alone. Actually, when you do manage well, wildlife populations thrive. And having increased diversity on the landscape promotes not only native species that a lot of us get to see each day, maybe the deer, the turkey that really kind of resides close to our hearts, but most of the other species that we don't think about that are maybe threatened or endangered or maybe about to go away and be lost forever if something's not done. So we have a lot of things to consider when we look at management on a landscape level. Approximately 25% of the land will be maintained in more old growth over time, which I think is very good, approximately. And there's going to be other areas that's going to be managed at different intervals. Many of this, no, I do not. I looked into it and prepared myself tonight so I could be educated and make a very good discussion.
Please let him finish.
And I won't
About
keep it
another minute.
anymore. I won't
About
keep
another
you
minute.
anymore. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity. But there are basically folks that come from all over the U.S., not only just here, to recreate here. And a lot of this management that is being done is very beneficial for the species that many folks want to come and see. The most visited place in America, does anyone know what that may be? Just for wildlife viewing. It is Cades Cove, actually. And the reason why folks go there, just like they like to come here, as we know, about 75% of the folks like to come to view wildlife. And through good quality management practices, wildlife thrive, and it provides those viewing opportunities, those recreation opportunities that people want to come and see. And with additional diversity, you do get that. Appreciate your time and your patience. And I appreciate everybody coming out. It's good to see a lot of folks come out and voice their opinion. It's important in the process.
Thank you. Next.
My name's John Henderson. I got a loud enough mouth everybody can hear me. I'd like to talk about the education and the restoration word that keeps thrown around. Even he said, this is fact. You cannot restore the land between the lakes to grasslands because it never was. Everybody here knows that furnaces were up and down this river for one reason and one reason only. The trees were so big. I have photographs of trees cut. I'm 6'7" tall. So are my ancestors. The trees are bigger than me when they're laying on the ground. They cut the trees and made the charcoal. It's the colons. There never was a grassland. Those trees that were cut were 1,000 years old. They weren't 100 years old. They weren't 200 years old. We've made the mistake before. It's over. And this guy right here, sorry, what's your name? Jason. Jason, you're wrong. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate everyone's comments. We thank you all once again for being here. We're going to let Wade say a few more things. Once again, make sure you write those on those comment cards and get your comments to the Forestry Service. Go ahead.
Thank you, folks, for coming. I appreciate it. We're going to continue to battle on this, and make sure you fill out those comment cards. If you filled out the comment cards, there's boxes at both exits that says comments on them. Stick them in.